Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this illustrating 3 video here. What we're going to be doing is exploring the concept of granite or stone in a illustrated type of image here. I have the dragon traced out, masked off with the clear contact paper. This is more of an advanced video, so a lot of people, I don't need to go into what the whole contact paper thing's about. If you are new to this, then the contact paper is conceptually used to replace the Frisket, which can be very expensive. Frisket also blows off of canvas most of the time if you go above 40 psi. But what I'm going to do for contrast reasons is go ahead and block out the background with black and peel the mask off here, and then I will actually cover the background back up. So I'll have a real crisp edge to work from the perimeter in. And it's always a good idea to do a light tack coat before you do any blasting of paint because of course you're going to get bleeding. So take it easy on the actual mask. Some people will lower their pressures. Let's do a tack coat all around this thing here. After I do a tack coat, I will open up the roller on this Aztec airbrush here to open up the cone and blast this paint out. Okay, basically I have the background isolated with black here. Again, this gives me a crisp perimeter. I'm going to cover the background up and expose the dragon and basically come in with a transparent gray and do kind of a no-nonsense wash over the whole thing here. Nothing fancy, just kind of a foundational tone here to kind of mute this down a little bit so that when I come in with the black and white speckles, they will actually show up. Not the black, but fundamentally the white speckles. Granite needs these things to work in basic composition or in textural composition. You won't see the white speckles if you don't have some type of foundation at the core here. I've sat back over the years and I've looked at all the DVDs I've done. I've never done granite. I've done cobblestone, but I've had requests to actually do granite, and I didn't want to do just basic swatches or whatever. I wanted to do some type of a sequential piece here that I could combine illustrating or advanced illustrating with the granite concept. So knowing how to establish and isolate edges and shade and all that stuff is relevant in tricking people's eyeballs, assigning value, creating contour dimension, and hopefully in the end you will have a good piece here. So let's go ahead and mask the background off here, expose the dragon's head. We'll do the dusting of gray and go to the next steps beyond that. I believe that a lot of the rudiments that I teach in airbrushing are definitely a lot of the foundational things that you would apply towards any type of Photoshop program or whatever. Now with the X-Acto knife here, I'm kind of flying through this. I normally don't work this quick, but you definitely can take the X-Acto knife blade and get a pair of pliers and just break it. Boom, you got a brand new blade. I always tell people you can get go to Walmart and get a sharpening stone and just sharpen the crap out of it over and over and over, or you can get a Dremel tool and just have at it. Eventually the X-Acto knife blades will go bad, but for the most part you don't want to just get one out of the box. Even though there's a gazillion of these things in the box, you don't just want to take one out of the box, use it for a minute, and then throw it away. Take our plastic off here. Okay, next step is my transparent gray here. Even though that looks black, I'm not going to spray it real heavy. Okay, so the reason I'm using transparent gray, it's pretty obvious. I don't want to kill my reference points on my initial sketch here. If you use opaque gray, you're not going to be able to see where a line starts and stops, or a line tapers, or what have you. So transparent gray is definitely going to be a must here. I'm trying to lay a foundational tone down so that when I come in and stipple or speckle the white, which is the mica, I believe, in the stone, you will be able to see the white. There's nothing fancy at this point here. Just come in and do a basic foundational tone. So one point on this is that people normally have a tendency to come in and not do the initial foundational tone here, but they'll come in and start trying to shade immediately. This initial gray I would actually call underpainting or kind of like base coating or whatever, except you're doing it in a transparent tone. So I'll come in here and just set this up. Try not to kill my reference points. Okay, I'm going to come in here now with the toothbrush and I'm stippling or speckling. I want to warn people about a couple things here. I've seen in magazines when I was younger where people actually taking catapult, like a Roman catapult, the paint onto the surface. That can actually look pretty cool with certain effects, but you definitely, when you're doing this, I think it's more controllable if you take your thumb and just flip the stipple with the speckles on here. This actually creates the organic texture of the stone. So number one, just flip this on here with your thumb. I have reduced the opaque black with the glass cleaner so that the speckles are basically fatter. If not, if you're using your basic skim milk consistency, Createx or whatever paint, and you flick it on there, it's going to be really fine. So I like to loosen it up with the glass cleaner and you get this kind of erratic speckle pattern. Number one. Number two, you definitely don't want to catapult the paint on there. If you do, you make it a big speckle like that, it may drip or whatever. Sometimes I actually like to lay the object down when I'm speckling or stippling. Actually, normally that's what I do. I'm going to come in with this pencil here, and I've really been using these mechanical pencils quite a bit. They stay sharp, blah blah blah, and I was always told by my art teacher, your artwork's going to turn out a lot better if you keep a sharp pencil. I'm going to come in and just kind of re-reference where some of these lines are, where I need to cut in with the shields and so on. Again, I'm going to warn everybody that the speckling can take on a very opaque nature and cover things up. Do some stippling over here on the nose. And again, they're pretty finite until you add glass cleaner or water, and then they break up and get a little bit fatter. Sometimes you want these dots to be bigger so that the eye catches them from a distance. Okay, I'm going to come in with my transparent gray now and just kind of flash some of this stuff back out. Try to stay out of the way here so the camera can pick my strokes up, but I'm definitely aiming at a 10-degree angle. I've always said that. It's going to give you a lot more control on your dagger strokes and so on. Some of the initial bleeding or overspray that came up underneath the contact paper initially, I wasn't really concerned with that because of the organic nature of what we're doing here. So I come in here with this transparent gray, and this is really for you guys to be able to pick up on the starting and stopping points of the image here. And we're doing the basic initial sketching here. Now, as I've mentioned before here, I'm doing images that I think people can actually approach and do. Imagine that. I only have a certain amount of time, for the most part every time I'm doing something, so I always tell people that I would not teach this if you wouldn't be able to actually do it and apply it yourself. It's real important that when you're coming in with this initial sketching and shading, that you don't get too heavy-handed, because it may be hard to erase some of this stuff later or actually shade over it or balance it out. So everything's just kind of a little wisp right now, kind of setting everything up. Really not doing any contouring or shading or anything, just really kind of setting up the roadmap on where the shields are going to be laid and where the line points are. Another reason why I'm doing the stone concept here is that, as everybody knows who's been airbrushing a long time, you can get away with a lot of realism with stone. And I've learned over the years that that's actually one of the secrets to keeping and retaining students, is especially someone that's just coming in with no knowledge really about art or anything. You give them some type of little magic textural trick to do, like stone or snakeskin or whatever, and they tend to stay into the field and pursue it. Come down here, one of the horns definitely protrudes out this way. It's no different than a pencil when you're sketching out or shading something. Okay, so I'm continuing to set up my initial sketching here. Again, there is no shading whatsoever on here. This is actually an excellent exercise towards the sequence of building a composition. You can do your initial dusting, you need your roadmap on where things start and stop, and then what you'll do is you'll come in and you'll bust out the shields, you'll start refining edges and refining and defining things. I really wanted to make sure that when I was approaching something like this, of course Granite is the predominant thing that we're trying to learn here, Granite and shield work, but also the concept of shadows. Again, I'm always a big fan of high contrast imagery because it just simply gives you more realism quicker. So basically, as always, at the end, what I'm trying to do is again have a dark background, have some type of a high contrast, really dramatic lighting type of image. Over the years, I've noticed a lot of people, especially on Facebook or whatever, that are really reverting. I don't know if they're listening to me or if they're just seeing kind of a pattern in the culture of airbrushing, but people are really choosing high contrast images because again, you can get in and out, make things look realistic and look really dramatic. So as always, I'm working really big here, and the reason for that is always that you actually have more room to taper. If you were to try to do an image like this on a gas tank this big, guess what? You may get a cramp in your hand or whatever because you're actually going to be forced to work smaller. You might have to grab a micron airbrush. But I've always said that control is learned from working bigger to smaller and then lighter, which I've been doing here. Look at what I've been doing. I've worked really light. Now I'm going in and getting dark. I'm adding more tone. I'm continuing to add more gray that's going to support the white speckles. So here's what I want to do. I want to kind of pause all this for a minute, or put a bookmark here. And I want people to think even outside of the realm of fantasy art or whatever. Maybe you're doing a fine art piece of an angel. It's really up to you. This whole concept evolves around the substrate itself or the texture. And definitely do not be afraid to try this in a fine art realm. It's totally applicable, I think. So now we're really picking up the stone look here. It's going to give me all kinds of advantages to come in and manipulate texture and curves. But again, you need this initial foundation on here. And I'll come in here now with the white stipple. And again, you can loosen this paint up if you want to diversify the size of the dots. This white stipple presupposes the mineral, the mica that's in the stone, I believe. So you can see that actually adds a contrasting part to this, gives it a little bit more textural interest, and can even calm down certain areas that you don't like if you got carried away with the pencil and so on. So I'll continue this all the way around and we'll come in with some shading. Let's go ahead and move on here. You can see how definitely that foundational gray that we used earlier helps these white speckles show up. If you didn't have that gray, the eye would not even be picking those up. So what I'm going to do is come in here now and I'm going to bring this freehand template in. You can use whatever template floats your boat, but I'm realizing more and more how this is a really good treatment on these shields. So what I'm going to do is start splitting edges like so, and this is the whole concept around illustrating. And again, I'm starting to realize how this is a really good exercise on the shields. I didn't realize it until I started thinking about all the contours and everything people are going to learn how to do, like this one right here with splitting these edges. So I have the transparent gray in my airbrush here, and I'm not going to go to black yet. It's going to be real important that I don't come in here and kill this with some obnoxious black. I've learned that the more you actually utilize your gray, you can see I'm just going around the perimeter of where that horn stops there. The more you use gray, you keep things muted, I think the more realistic things are going to be. So it's a good habit to get into. Eventually this gray will appear very black, but maybe sneak the black in at the end. I'm bringing this shape inside the perimeter of the mask, giving it a little edge like so, and then a wash on each side. A lot of people who've been drawing a long time know that if you're new to airbrushing or new to art, this is actually going to help give the shape contour. So you can see right out of the gate why I use these types of textures in my videos. as they retain a sense of realism pretty quick. Okay, I'm going to come in here and shade each side of the teeth here, each individual tooth. And basically, for now, I'm going to stay off the middle. Again, this is creating a contour type of shape. Now, it's always a good footnote that I'm spraying about 75% on the mask and 25% on the surface. I've noticed over the years that helps a lot of students with their perceptual awareness, or their spatial awareness. Notice also I'm working in little wisps. I can go in with my bird shield, start trapping at the gum line, just to separate those there. It's kind of hit and miss. You can see how that displaces the leveling a little bit better. And you might want to do this. Let's see where we're going. Create a little sketch there, so I'm not guessing on everything. And make sure you wipe the template off if you need to. You don't want to reposition wet paint. One footnote here is I did come in and add a couple drops of black to my airbrush. Let's go up here to the nostril area. I'll kind of sketch and preface where I'm going with this. And I think I will use the bird shield quite a bit in this demonstration. Just because, number one, it's such a big image. I just know from experience that the way some of these edges are shaped, the bird shield's going to come in handy. Now watch what I do here. I'm going to go really soft with these in the beginning, and I'll take a look, step back and see where I'm at. You can see how I can start sculpting these edges out. There's a break right here. I usually get real close when I want to really emphasize these creases. It's kind of like on the Eagle video I did. Now you can see how a crease starts off as a crease. And look how close I'm getting. I'm also at a 10-degree angle. But sometimes creases need to fade out. And the nostril is going to come around here a little bit. As always, everything's a wisp, not a Krylon stroke. Krylon strokes are cheesy. If you're being taught that way by a certain airbrush teacher, you can try that, but and some airbrushers do get away with moving the airbrush back and forth, but I just think it's dangerous when you're in the inception of learning this skill to wave an airbrush back and forth. There's a subdued crease here. You've got to be careful on how I nail this down. Something like this. Do a test run, really light. So you'll see why this bird shield is used over and over. It just really nails down a lot of these essential creases. So I put a basic indentation or taper in the granite there. Now what I'll be doing at the end is coming in with cracks and highlights and all that kind of stuff to really emphasize this even more. Now a lot of realists know that if you have an organic texture, even something as simple as a sphere when you're doing airbrushing, let's say if you had a sphere and it basically has a really simple granite type of pattern on it, all you got to do is shade the edge of that sphere and it almost looks photorealistic. So it kind of takes a trained eye to do these things, but it's very, very true. I'm going to shade each side of these horns, get a little bit closer to pierce out each of these. I'm going to come in here and put a little crease there, crease there. One thing that's cool about doing granite also is if you come in and you overdo anything, you can definitely come back and speckle white on it if you dust something out too much or what have you. Okay, there's kind of a traversing or inverted type of slope in this area here. And this is kind of the dangerous area. That's why I'm doing a little bit light at the beginning. This is a stone object, so hopefully it will look carved and so on. Now I'm going to start trapping the edges like so, but again, this is going to take some craftsmanship. You're sculpting an edge. So sculptors know that they have to be careful when they're doing things. It's no different with us. What I can do is I'm just kind of winging this and crawling through it. You could definitely take a piece of contact paper, put down here, and cut this part out, peel it, the top's covered, and we could do an acute edge, or you could expedite the process by doing this. Look how this works. I can start off like this, and I can take this, flip it around, okay, and then just continue to sculpt this out. As long as you don't reposition wet paint. You can do a scoot and move, as I always say. I could split the eye here, just to kind of set it up. And up here we have another crisp type of edge. So this swoops under, flat, and then we basically are going to have another layer here. So if this thing was any bigger, if this dragon was any bigger, I would probably have to revert to a straight edge or something. But I think I'll be okay, knock on wood, for most of this. As always, I like leaving the eye kind of sneaky and subdued. It's a high contrast shadow area there. I'm just making decisions as I go along with how intense I want to get. Okay, so I can come in here and pierce this out a little bit more. And there's a lot of shading down here. And when you're shading, it's always a good idea to step back, go get a soda pop or whatever, and see where you're at before you kill something. Because what you're doing is you're assigning value at this point. The cracks, the granite cracks, are really going to pop these edges out. You can see now how we have a layer here. Boom, flush, then we have another layer. The darker I get, the more depth there's going to be here. And let's move around here. Now you definitely always want to move around when you're doing any type of anything, whether it be portraits or whatever. Why? Because basically if you stay in one area too long, you're going to overwork it. I'm basically going to shade on each side of these horns, here and here, here and here, to leave the middle, for the most part, pretty void. Let's go ahead and split the neck from the horn. This is what I'm saying, is that this is a really good exercise for shielding 101, how to trap edges, how to isolate shapes, and basically what this is doing is pushing the neck forward and the other horn back. I always tell people that these shields really just become part of your hand after a while. You really get used to just where to throw the edges, especially this bird shield. Start trapping them, and again, the whole concept is sculpting the edge out, so we can do the scoot and move. But you can see how much paint is on this shield, so I definitely better be careful. So this is really important. I went like this to trap the edge there, but down here I can flip this around. Let's do the where are we going thing, where are we going, and I can lay the template like so, trap the edge, do a scoot and move, and lightly sculpt this thing out. Sometimes maybe you don't have to totally trace it out, depending on how you want it to look. So I'm going to continue to come in here, leave the middle somewhat void. I'm pulling back in the airbrush as I'm shading out here. And again, if I come in with some solid black, it's definitely going to be towards the end. I'm not going to kill this too dark too soon, because everything's going to have to match that. Bit of a cast shadow right here, so I'll go ahead and a little bit of indication of that, maybe pierce that out a little bit more. Pretty rudimentary stuff right there. The neck is going to have a crease here. Make sure I sculpt this out. You're going to have an indentation right there. That brings the jaw line forward. So you might have a crease like so. You might have a little muscleage down there. Keep my continuity here. Split this one. Do some shading. This is a sloping type of thing here, a hill. So I can come in and kind of pound out some shadow areas here. You can see how this sinks it down. Do some shading, tapering around the eye here. I'm going to intensify my shading a little bit more here. Any white that I knock down, I will definitely come back in and pop back out. Do my scooting move still. Have these little streaky nuances like I'm doing here. You probably can't see all of them when I'm spraying them, but there's not a tool in the world that picks these up as good as the airbrush does. And you'll see at the very end how that black is really going to dominate some of these piercing little areas. This dark gray, or this transparent gray, is only going to go so far. I'm going to show everybody a nice little trick here. I came back in with some white speckles, just playing around, and some of the white speckles are a little bit too dominant, but I've learned from the past, if you come back in and try to dust back over them with gray, I mean, you can do it, you better be careful, but it's so much easier just to take a pencil and just draw over the speckles that are just too loud. Okay, I'll come in now in this upper left-hand corner and put some tone in here, darken it up quite a bit. So we have an indentation that's happening. Remember, the light's right here, okay? So these areas are going to stay void. I'll continue to get darker back here. This all is going to be somewhat flowing as far as light source, boom, and then out. So I do want kind of a trapping point with the light right here. But you got to keep your shadows flowing. And for the people that say that using templates is cheating and all that kind of stuff, again, it takes skill, patience, and craftsmanship to be able to use these things. So they're really just used for refinement. Okay, with the top teeth here, we went like this, across all of them, trap them, and so on. The bottom ones is just the opposite. We're going to come down here and see where we're going, get our road map going. This pattern is so organic, it's really hard to see your pencil lines, especially at this point. Spray too much paint, especially on the real dinky teeth, you're just going to totally black the tooth out. So again, you're getting real close when you're piercing things out. Piercing is kind of like certain little areas that the eye catches, that presupposes a nuance of a split or a bevel or whatever. This area down here underneath the horn is going to kind of fog out a little bit. There's a cast shadow down there, but predominantly it's just kind of a filler type of area there. Now you come in here and shade the jawline a little bit. Yeah, come in with some straight black now, opaque black. And I've added my flow enhancer to it. And this is what I'm talking about. This black is really, really intense. So you want to do this at the end. Look how dark it made that whole area. So when I'm coming in with this black, this is the piercing that I always talk about. But you still don't want to get too intense with it. kind of get in and out, get real close, nail certain things down. I'll come in and spray this area here, a little crease. Watch what I do. I'm going to flip this around like so and slope it around and keep my airbrush at an angle. Just taper that out. Shadow area right here. So you can see granite comes together pretty easily once you know how to shade it. So we've really emphasized this slope to hot point of light to dip again. Taper those out. See how important tapering is. You just don't want to come in there. I see that a lot with people beginning in airbrushing, is they'll just do a little edge and they won't taper it out like so. And guess what? A lot of the reason that is because they won't put down either their cheesy airbrush or their airbrush that they need to throw in the ocean or get a different one. So I'll come in here and do my piercing areas here with my opaque black. Again, what we're trying to do is make sure that this thing does not look like a cutout of paper that's smacked on a surface here. So it's very valuable to students when I tell them exactly how close I'm getting here. When I come in at the end here with this opaque black, you can actually almost get right up on the surface when you're piercing these edges out. Definitely wipe the paint off on a rag or your arm or whatever. Get a little bit closer and you can see how I can come in here and really just pop these areas out. That's the edge. Here's the wash. And again, the dramatic thing here with a contoured surface like this is sinking these horns into the background. This will help us with the cheesy paper cutout look. Same thing with the jawline here. And again, see how close I'm getting, almost right up on the surface to pop these areas out. Again, if you get too dark in any of these areas, just come in with maybe some white stipple or some airbrush white paint and do some reconstructive surgery. And we'll come in here and split this area here, be real careful, make sure it's aligned. And we'll come on down to the bottom here. There's going to be a cast shadow right here. I'll go ahead and re-emphasize this area. So I'm really just coming in here, and believe it or not, I'm very much taking my time. Just kind of dusting over this edge. I don't want to kill it. I really just want to kind of blend it in with the background, maybe hide some of the cut marks that you may sometimes see. Punch out this nostril here real quick. Okay, we can define the side a little bit more. I'll pop some of this back out. Now we have this slope on the side of the face here that goes into the mouth. Remember, shadows transition. Okay, they actually go from dark to light. Okay, and on the next step here I have this Dremel tool with this little tiny sanding bit. It's very hard to see probably on camera, but this is a solid round little sanding grinding mechanism here that fits right into the Dremel tool. And what we're going to do is bring it over here and we're going to basically start taking paint off the surface here. I think it's very essential to come in with something like this and start detailing it. And you really want to try to be careful with the RPM on the actual Dremel tool. But at this point, this is where you make a decision on how much time you want to spend on something. I could do, I don't know, maybe 3 hours to 80 hours. It depends on the deadline, you know, the intensity of the look that you're going for, and so on. You're going to have some etiquette with this, and just don't get in here and be a cheese ball and do a lot of line work and so on. If you take your time with this thing, it will pay off. You can already see the kind of organic look that I have here, which, believe it or not, is different than the actual white speckles or the stippling. Okay, as we cruise down into these shadow areas here, you want to use about half the pressure on this Dremel tool here. You want to retain these shadow areas, but you do want some type of a pattern in there. So really go about maybe half the intensity. The eye likes to flow. The eye likes to flow when it actually crawls across something. So we don't want all this intense texture here. And then when we get to the shadow areas, there's absolutely nothing. So everything has to be a continuum and a flow. Okay, on this horn here, I will definitely put more pressure in the middle, which is going to be the hottest point of light. And I'll also make sure that when you're cruising along here, you flow with the actual shape. It's real easy to kind of crisscross around and so on, but I try to keep your continuity and flow with the shape here. Okay, I'm going to come in here now to my ripped cardboard. I got my transparent gray, as you can see there, and add some more distress to the surface. Don't want to be too cheesy with this. I want to try to be the surface or be the stone. And just pretend that, again, the sands of time have actually nicked this thing or what have you. You can be pretty random with this as long as it looks believable. Certainly you want to work with photo references and stay true to what you see, not what you think you see. Allow the image to breathe. I will set this up with these random little nuances here, and then pretty soon I'll come in with a paintbrush and extend some of these cracks over. So rip a bunch of these up before you get started, and it'll look a lot more believable. That's the Lazy Rule 101. So you can see I'm kind of being hit and miss. I'm leaving this alone, but I'm kind of randomly just jumping around here so it looks believable. You can also keep your knuckles on the surface and create like a muted type of edge. And I'll get real close if I want to pierce some of these areas out. Okay, so I'll take my paintbrush now and extend these out. And this is a very important step. Black could be way too dominant for something like this, and it usually is. It just depends on what you're doing. Again, if I need to darken these up later on, I can do that. I'm just trying to get a roadmap on where I'm going. What we're trying to do basically is make this light enough to where it looks believable, but dark enough to where the eye can pick this up from a distance. This is kind of a filler thing. This is a very void area here. So we're going to have to sneak some kind of texture in. Okay, we can come in here with our X-Acto knife and we can scratch highlights. This is old school airbrushing here, but it still works. One thing that's really important when you're scraping, it's easy to get lazy with this too, is to actually taper your scratches. That's kind of an anal retentive thing to do, but it actually works. I think makes things look a lot more believable. And zooming in, you can see this a little bit better. Anything that's too cheesy, we can just calm it back down with the gray paint or what have you. And if you want, you can just take your pencil and just randomly rub over all this. Sometimes highlights can be too dominant. Depends on how picky you are. But this is actually what working in transparent layers means. So basically the Dremel tool is blending into this scratching that we just did. It's going to once again be able to control these highlights a little bit better, but we still want this finite scratch that's tapering out there. So see, hopefully this is making sense now. When you're basically scratching and smearing and scratching and smearing, you really get this kind of complex look that you did more than you actually did. You're really manipulating the texture itself. And we'll get a little bit darker in this area here. And I added a couple drops of black to my gray to pierce these edges out over here. Hopefully you're starting to see, and this is pretty much the universal pattern of how to do this, is that Every time I put a dark nuance, whether it be a line or some type of indentation or recession, I'm basically highlighting the top of it, and that will presuppose the hottest point of light. So as you can see here, all the dark areas basically get a white highlight on top of them. But this right here, this kind of feathery, shaly type of area is probably one of the best areas to reference the etiquette of the Dremel tool there. Especially in this area here, I really came in with super duper light pressure, almost to the point where I felt like I was going to drop the Dremel tool. I don't know what other way to explain to people how lightly I'm holding that thing. And I'm going to come in here with my pencil and just kind of smear certain edges. I keep switching techniques because I want you guys to have a lot of different ways to approach things. Pencil really smears nicely on a canvas, especially when you're doing this granite technique. I'll come in with a bigger edge now. Kind of cruise along here. Now, as you can see, if you take your time, you can really build up the texture pretty nicely. You don't want to be a cheese ball and totally start outlining things with this. And as always, you can come in here and put nicks and dings, whether it be a dot or maybe a slash on the surface. The thing about this is you don't want to get too carried away. It's easy to come in here and do too many of these. That's why I'm doing those last. We can scratch the underside of those. And if you got a dot right here, just scratch the right side of it. Just try to keep your continuity when you're doing this. And zooming in, you can see how this really picks up a believable texture. Now also with the X-Acto knife, you can come in here and transition the highlights into the shadow types of areas here. It works quite well. I think it's the transparent gray that's very forgiving when you're doing this subtractive highlighting process here. And with my opaque black here, I'm just continuing the distress, boom, boom, going down here. I cannot use the original smoky dark gray because you won't see it in this shadow area. So I'm reverting to the straight opaque black. Granite lines themselves are very addictive. You really got to step back and ask yourself, have I done too much? Would it really look like that in real nature? I was taught a long time ago by one of my art teachers that you have what's called the value of line. And sometimes lines need to be thick, they need to taper, and that is actually the value in that line. It's a very good term to know. Okay, and zooming out here, you can see how these black lines definitely show up. That's what I'm trying to go for here. I want the eye to catch these things from a distance. If I would have came in here with the dark gray lines, they definitely would not have shown up. So what I will definitely do here is jump around, not do too many of these, and then we'll come in and do the subtractive highlighting again with the X-Acto knife and start scratching some of these so that they will further pick up the eye from a distance. So if the black line is going up and down, I'm scratching the right-hand side of it. If the black line is going this way, horizontally, I'm scratching the underside of it. And here's what's really cool, even these stipple spots here, we can scratch the right-hand side of these. I'm going to just rub this pencil over this, smear it. You can see how it just calms it down. You don't want to totally kill the nice scratching you've done, but you just want to subdue these highlights. Okay, and as you can see, I elongated these horns out a little bit so they didn't look so cookie cutter. I'm going to come in with some distress here, and I definitely have to be careful at this stage of the game here because I could really overdo it. So again, anything that does not look believable, we can come back in, speckle over it, grind it back out. I think you get a lot of chances here. This is going to taper. I'll hit this small horn a little bit here, and just a little bit up top here. And maybe an indication of something going on over here. A little bit of drama right here. I want to mention you can get very, very artistic and very realistic with this thing and put as much time into this as you want. This is actually what pops all this out. I think the whole point here is that if you have these muted areas like here and here, you just come in on the top of these and do your random little grinding. It will create the distress. You can come in here and do a lot of little breaking types of scenarios. It's really up to you. But for the most part, we're trying to establish continuity in the light hitting these in the same area. I think one thing you really have to appreciate about all this grinding and scratching is the amount of realism that starts to occur and how fast that realism happens. So what I'm doing now is glazing over this area here. Anything that was too dark or not believable, you can just keep going back and forth, back and forth. I've been saying that throughout the whole video here. You can see that that actually creates a lot of the realism. There's no one rule as far as the sequence, as long as you just make it look real. Okay, one thing I want to explain here is that when you're coming in with the white, just like black and shading, you're actually doing different values or intensities of white also. I think that's monumental in making things look believable. So make sure you pay attention to the different nuances of how white something is. It's going to have a lot of different levels and intensities. So I'll start to scratch here, and then I'll go real light on the blade. Super light. Try to blend that back. Okay, and with Granite you can also do some little kind of webby type of patterns. Don't get too crazy. A little bit of crisscrossy types of patterns like so. I mean, you can get really intense with an X-Acto knife. And I'll scratch the perimeter into the black here. You can see how it all blends in pretty nicely. So as I move up to this horn right here, I'm going to continue adding the highlighting, but I want to kind of footnote that similar shapes for the most part are going to be hit with distress in the fundamentally the same areas, but I want to try to get in here and diversify the actual highlighting as much as possible. So, in other words, don't make them all exactly alike. Like I put an indentation up here, and I'll keep messing with this one. But you want to try to switch them up, but fundamentally they're going to have the same distress shadow areas. So as you can see here, the distress is a lot lighter on this one as opposed to these two. And that's kind of the diversity that I always try to create. It can easily get very redundant when you're doing the exact same thing to every one. So since this horn is sitting a little bit higher, I might make it quite a bit lighter. Let's go in and darken some of this in here. Okay, this lip area here is a real good example of being the surface. I always tell people, if you're trying to understand where highlights and shading go, just be the surface or be the object. This lip is going to have little crescent strokes. You need a lot of TLC in this area because you can really get cheesy and do a lot of crisscrossy or just fake looking stuff. So lip highlights really have a lot of crescent types of strokes going on. I'm trying to keep the continuity of the strokes even. And I'm doing a lot of what I call micro tuning now, as I'm really getting in here intricately and going bananas with this X-Acto blade. The lip here is going to have somewhat of an acute highlight right at the breaking point. Okay, you can see how this all starts to come together here when you do all this intricate scratching. It could go on and on. You could put hundreds of hours into this. But what I'm going to do next here is blend these two horns out like I've done here. I left this unfinished in this area to show you the differential here on what it looks like if you blend the shape into the background as opposed to if you don't. And with my Aztec roller opened all the way to the right, I'm going to add some tone in these top areas here. Notice I'm doing this at the very, very end. And I'll put a little bit of drama up here with the highlighting. Okay, in this area here I'm going to come in with quite a bit of pressure on the Dremel tool. Don't puncture the canvas, but this is definitely one of the hottest points of light, and the tapering of the highlight is going to be necessary here so it actually blends in with the contours of the top part of the head here. So you can see how this definitely lights up the contour of the top of the head here. It creates the curviness and the hottest point of light. Okay, I painted some paintbrush strokes up in here with the gray, and I'm coming in here and I'm scratching the detail out. I really want to diversify the continuity and the flow of this as it crawls along. The breaking is getting smaller to bigger. Okay, wrapping this up here, you can see how the intensity of the scratching and all the subtractive highlighting really creates the believability of the surface here. I think one of the main things that I'm really trying to pull off here is the awareness that you need a really good balance of textures, freehand template work, shading, craftsmanship, and control, certainly. So you want to try to combine all these elements for a good composition. Pay attention to all the little nuances, come in there with the detailed work, and you can really have a clean, professional image as you're going through this whole process. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.